Breaking, President Hichilema wants Archbishop Banda removed? Membi drops bombshell. It's an allegation shaking Zambia's political and religious space. Fred Membi now claims President Hakainde Hichilema wants Archbishop Alick Banda removed. If true, this would mark an unprecedented confrontation between State House and the Catholic Church. But is this an orchestrated attack on a clergyman or a politically charged interpretation of events? Tonight, we examine the claim, the context, and the facts. Good day, viewers. Welcome to another edition of InspirAfrica Official. I'm Nakash. We're starting the week with what might be one of the most explosive political revelations to emerge from Zambia in recent months. A story that touches the very heart of the relationship between church and state, between power and principle, between those who govern and those who dare to speak truth to that power. Picture this. A nation watching as its president, elected on promises of transparency and democratic renewal, allegedly moves behind closed doors to silence one of the country's most outspoken religious voices. Imagine the corridors of State House, where whispered conversations may have turned into concrete plans. Envision the shock rippling through religious communities as word spreads that their archbishop, their shepherd, their voice of conscience, might be marked for removal. But who would dare make such an accusation? Who would risk everything to expose what they claim is a presidential plot against a man of the cloth? And what could drive a sitting president to target an archbishop whose only weapon is his pulpit and whose only crime appears to be speaking uncomfortable truths? Is this the beginning of a new chapter in Zambia's political story, one where dissent is silenced and critics are systematically removed? Or is it something else entirely? A misunderstanding blown out of proportion, a political maneuver disguised as persecution, or perhaps the desperate claims of opposition figures seeking relevance in an increasingly polarized landscape? What happens when the line between legitimate governance and authoritarian overreach begins to blur? When does accountability become persecution? And when a voice as prominent as Fred Membi drops what he calls a bombshell, should we listen with alarm or with skepticism? The answers to these questions may determine not just the fate of one archbishop, but the very soul of Zambian democracy. Factual foundation. The revelation came to light through Fred Membi, the veteran journalist and politician who leads the Socialist Party of Zambia. Membi, never one to shy away from controversy, made the stunning allegation that President Hakainde Hichilema's administration has been working to engineer the removal of Archbishop Alick Banda from his position within the Catholic Church. Archbishop Banda has become one of the most vocal critics of the Hichilema administration since the United Party for National Development took power. From his pulpit and through various public statements, the Archbishop has consistently challenged government policies, questioned the administration's commitment to the poor, and raised alarm about what he perceives as democratic backsliding. The timeline of tension between State House and the Catholic prelate stretches back months. It began with subtle disagreements, the Archbishop's pastoral letters questioning economic policies that he argued disadvantaged the vulnerable. Then came more direct criticisms, sermons that named specific failures, homilies that drew uncomfortable parallels between current governance and past authoritarian regimes. According to Membi's account, what started as irritation within government circles evolved into something more calculated. The Socialist Party leader claims to have received information, though he has been careful about revealing his sources, suggesting that officials close to President Hichilema began exploring mechanisms through which an archbishop could be removed or sidelined. The claim centers on alleged behind-the-scenes communications between government representatives and various entities within and beyond Zambia's borders. Membi suggests that these efforts may have involved reaching out to Vatican officials or other church authorities, presenting a case against Archbishop Banda that would justify his removal or transfer. The specific timeline Membi alleges remains somewhat murky, but he places these efforts within recent months, coinciding with some of the Archbishop's most pointed criticisms of the administration's handling of economic challenges, debt restructuring, and social welfare programs. Direct evidence. Fred Membi, speaking at a press conference that has since circulated widely on social media, didn't mince words. His statement was delivered with the gravity of someone who believes he's exposing a fundamental threat to Zambian democracy. "We have it on good authority," Membi began, his voice measured but firm, "that there are active efforts by State House to have Archbishop Alick Banda removed from his position. This is not speculation. This is not rumor.
This is information that has come to us from multiple sources, some within government circles themselves, who are deeply troubled by what they're witnessing. He continued, leaning forward for emphasis, the Archbishop's crime, if we can call it that, is simply speaking truth. He has dared to question policies that hurt the poor. He has dared to challenge a government that promised change but has, in many ways, continued the practices of those who came before. And for this, for exercising his pastoral duty to be the voice of the voiceless, he is now being targeted. When pressed by journalists about the specifics of these alleged efforts, Membi elaborated, "What we understand is that there have been communications, diplomatic channels, if you will, aimed at presenting the Archbishop as divisive, as overly political, as someone who has overstepped the boundaries of his religious role. The goal, quite simply, is to build a case that would convince church authorities that he needs to be removed or at minimum transferred to a position where his voice would be less prominent."
A reporter asked, "Mr. Membi, do you have documentary evidence of these communications?"
Membi paused, choosing his words carefully. "We have information from sources we trust. People who have been in rooms where these conversations have happened."
Now, am I going to produce transcripts or recordings today? No. Would doing so compromise those sources and potentially put them at risk? Yes. But I want to be clear, we do not make these allegations lightly. He went on, "Look, I've been in journalism long enough to know the weight of accusations like this. I've been in politics long enough to understand the consequences of speaking out. But when you have information that a sitting president is using the machinery of state to silence a religious leader, you have a moral obligation to speak up, regardless of the personal cost." Archbishop Banda himself has not remained silent in the face of mounting pressure. In recent homilies, while not directly addressing Membi's specific allegations, he has spoken about persecution and the cost of prophetic witness. "There are those," the Archbishop said in a Sunday sermon several weeks ago, "who would prefer a quiet church. A church that offers only comfort, never challenge. A church that blesses power but never questions it. But that is not the church of the Gospels. That is not the church that stands with the poor and the marginalized." He continued, his voice rising, "I have been called divisive. I have been accused of being too political. But tell me, when government policies create hunger, when economic decisions push families deeper into poverty, when the vulnerable cry out and no one listens, is it political to speak for them? Or is it simply Christian?" Government responses to both Membi's allegations and the Archbishop's criticisms have been notably restrained but firm. Cornelius Mwitwa, the government spokesperson, addressed the matter briefly. "The government of President Hichilema respects religious freedom and the independence of all religious institutions. We do not, and will not, interfere in the internal affairs of any church. These allegations are baseless and appear designed to create unnecessary tension and division." When pushed further about whether any government officials had communicated with church authorities about Archbishop Banda, Mwitwa responded, "The government engages with various stakeholders, including religious leaders and institutions, on matters of national importance. This is normal and appropriate. To characterize such engagement as persecution or interference is both inaccurate and, frankly, irresponsible." Deeper analysis. The implications of Membi's allegations extend far beyond one archbishop or one administration. At stake is a fundamental question about the role of religious institutions in African democracies and the limits of legitimate criticism in societies still finding their democratic footing. The Catholic Church in Zambia, like many churches across Africa, has long played a dual role: spiritual shepherd and social conscience. During the one-party state era under Kenneth Kaunda and later during the increasingly authoritarian rule of Frederick Chiluba, church leaders were often the only voices capable of challenging power with any degree of immunity. That tradition has created an expectation that bishops and archbishops will speak out on matters of public concern, even when those statements make politicians uncomfortable. Dr. Sishiwa, a political analyst and historian, offers context. "What we're seeing here is a tension as old as the Zambian state itself. Governments want the church's blessing and moral authority when it suits them, but bristle when that same moral authority is turned in their direction. The Hichilema administration came to power promising a new dawn,
but they're discovering what all governments discover, that criticism from the pulpit is far more difficult to manage than criticism from opposition politicians. The legal and procedural questions are equally complex. If the allegations are true, what mechanisms could a government actually employ to influence church personnel decisions? The Catholic Church is a hierarchical institution with its own internal governance structures, ultimately answerable to the Vatican. No Zambian president can simply order an archbishop's removal. However, diplomatic pressure is another matter entirely. Zambia maintains diplomatic relations with the Vatican, and it's not unprecedented for governments to express concerns about religious leaders they view as problematic. The question becomes whether such expression of concern crosses the line from legitimate diplomatic engagement into inappropriate interference. Father Peter Ndlovu, a respected theologian not directly involved in the controversy, notes the delicate balance: church and state must engage in dialogue. That's healthy. But there's a difference between dialogue and intimidation, between expressing concern and demanding removal. If government officials are indeed working to engineer an archbishop's removal because they dislike his message, that's not dialogue, that's authoritarianism. The political ramifications are significant. For the opposition, including Zambia's Socialist Party, these allegations provide ammunition to argue that the UPND government is no different from its predecessors when it comes to tolerating criticism. For government supporters, Zambia's timing and lack of concrete evidence suggest a political hit job designed to undermine a popular president. Public opinion appears divided along predictable lines. Those already skeptical of Hichilema see Zambia's allegations as confirmation of their fears. Those who support the president view the claims as desperate attention-seeking by a marginalized opposition figure. Yet there are also voices calling for a more measured assessment. Some civil society leaders have urged both sides to de-escalate, warning that inflammatory rhetoric about persecution and authoritarianism could become self-fulfilling prophecies, creating the very polarization and democratic erosion everyone claims to oppose. Ambiguities remain. Without documentary evidence or on-the-record testimony from government officials, Zambia's allegations rest on the credibility he's built over decades as a journalist and his willingness to stake his reputation on unnamed sources. Archbishop Banda's situation is similarly complex. Is he a prophet speaking truth to power, or has he crossed lines that religious leaders should respect, becoming more political actor than pastoral leader? The answers likely lie somewhere in the nuanced middle ground that political combat rarely acknowledges. Thank you so much for watching today's edition. This story is far from over. As more information emerges, as government and church officials respond, as the public weighs in, we'll continue to follow every development. What do you think? Are Zambia's allegations credible, or is this political theater? Should religious leaders speak out on political matters, or should they stay in their lane? Does Archbishop Banda represent prophetic courage or inappropriate politicization of the church? And regardless of the specifics of this case, what does it tell us about the state of Zambian democracy? I want to hear your thoughts, your perspectives, your analysis. Drop your comments below. Let's have a respectful but vigorous discussion about these crucial questions. Share this video with others who care about these issues. Let's expand the conversation beyond echo chambers and engage with those who might see things differently. We'll be back tomorrow with more news, more analysis, more of the stories that shape our continent and our future. Until then, stay informed, stay engaged, and stay committed to the truth, wherever it leads us. This is Nakash, signing off from InspirAfrica Official. See you tomorrow.